Have you ever stopped to ponder the significance of Veterans Day? It's more than just a date on the calendar. It's a time to honor those who've served in our nation's armed forces. It's a day that holds a deep and profound history, intertwined with the echoes of World War I. It's a day intertwined with global observances like Armistice Day and Remembrance Day. But what's the story behind it all? Today, we embark on a journey to delve into the roots of this important day. The story of Veterans Day begins in the aftermath of a great world conflict. In the early 20th century, the world was embroiled in a conflict unlike any it had ever seen. This was World War I, a war so colossal, so devastating, that it earned the moniker the Great War. It was a time of unprecedented devastation, which saw millions of lives lost and entire cities brought to ruin. Then, on the 11th day of the 11th month, in the year 1918, an armistice was signed, bringing an end to the hostilities. This moment, marked at the 11th hour, became a symbol of the world's yearning for peace after the horrors of war. It was on this day, November 11th, that the first seeds of what we now know as Veterans Day were sown. At first, this day was known as Armistice Day, a day dedicated to the memory of the fallen and the hope for a peaceful future. The scars of the war were still fresh, its impact immeasurable. The world had seen the true cost of war, and there was a global desire, a fervour even, to honour the heroes who had paid that cost. Armistice Day was initially a day of mourning, a day to remember the brave who had fallen. But as time went on, the focus began to shift. The world began to understand the need to not only mourn the fallen, but also to honour the living, the veterans who had served and survived. And so, Armistice Day evolved. It became a day to honour all veterans, not just those who had fallen in the Great War. It was a recognition of the sacrifice and service of all military veterans, a day to say thank you to those brave men and women who had served their country. The echoes of the guns had barely faded when the world began to honour its heroes. And so it continues today, every November 11th, as we remember and honour those who have served in the United States Armed Forces. As the world changed, so did the way we honour our veterans. In the beginning, this day was known as Armistice Day, a day of remembrance for the end of World War I. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, the guns fell silent, marking the end of the Great War. This day was dedicated to the cause of world peace and honoured the veterans of World War I. However, as the 20th century progressed, the United States found itself embroiled in other significant conflicts, such as World War II and the Korean War. These wars produced a new generation of veterans who had served their nation with distinction. It became increasingly clear that Armistice Day was not broad enough to adequately honour these new veterans. In response to this, a Kansas shoe store owner named Alvin King proposed the idea of expanding Armistice Day to honour all veterans, not just those who served in World War I. King's proposal gained traction, and in 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower officially renamed Armistice Day to Veterans Day. This change reflected the expanding role of the military and the growing number of veterans who had served in these subsequent wars. Since then, Veterans Day has evolved to honour all individuals who have served in the United States Armed Forces. It's a day of deep gratitude, a day to express our sincere appreciation for the sacrifices these brave men and women have made. It's a day to say thank you, not just to those who served in the world wars, but also to those who have served in conflicts across the globe, from Vietnam to Afghanistan, from the Gulf War to the ongoing operations against terrorism. The evolution of Veterans Day from Armistice Day represents our evolving understanding of what it means to be a veteran. It's not just about service in a single conflict, but about the commitment to serve one's country, no matter the cost. As the definition of a veteran grew, so did our appreciation for their service. Today, Veterans Day is more than just a date on the calendar. It's an annual reminder of the sacrifices made by the brave men and women who've served in the United States Armed Forces, a day when the nation collectively expresses its gratitude. In cities and towns across the country, Veterans Day is marked with ceremonies rich in tradition and symbolism. Imagine the sight of crisp uniforms and well-polished medals, the sound of bugles playing solemn tunes, and the quiet reverence of gathered crowds. These ceremonies are a poignant way to honor those who have served, a moment to reflect on their courage and dedication. But it's not just about formal ceremonies. Across the country, Veterans Day sparks a festive spirit with parades featuring marching bands, military vehicles, and veterans themselves, some walking with pride, others waving from cars and floats. These parades are a celebration of service, a display of national pride, and a show of respect for those who have worn the uniform. Then there's the tradition of laying wreaths at memorials. This act of remembrance, performed with solemn dignity, is a poignant symbol of the nation's gratitude. Each wreath represents a heartfelt thank you to those who have given so much in service to their country. But Veterans Day is not just about grand gestures, it's also about the smaller, personal acts of recognition. It's about children writing letters to veterans, neighbours reaching out with a word of thanks, and communities coming together to show their appreciation. It's about recognising the veterans among us, in our families, our workplaces, our schools, and acknowledging their contribution to our lives and our society. Veterans Day today is an opportunity for every citizen to express their gratitude. It's a chance to say thank you to our veterans, not just for their service, but for the peace and freedom they've helped to secure, for the sacrifices they've made and the challenges they've faced, for their courage, their commitment, and their unwavering dedication to their country. Every November 11th, we pause to say thank you to those who have served. We honour them, we remember them, and we appreciate them. Because Veterans Day is more than just a date on the calendar, it's a day of gratitude, recognition, and respect for all those who've served. But why do we remember? What is the significance of Veterans Day? To remember is to honour. It's an act of respect, a gesture of gratitude, and it's not just about the past, it's about the present and the future as well. When we remember, we acknowledge the sacrifices made by the brave men and women who have served in our armed forces. We recognise the courage, the resilience, and the dedication that it takes to put oneself in harm's way for the sake of others. Remembering our veterans is also about understanding the cost of peace. It's about acknowledging that the freedoms we enjoy today were hard-won, that they were paid for with sweat, with courage, and all too often with lives. When we remember, we pay tribute to those sacrifices. But it goes beyond individual recognition. Veterans Day is a collective act of remembrance. It's a moment for us as a society to pause and reflect, to come together in gratitude and respect. It's a chance for us to reaffirm the values that we hold dear: liberty, justice, and the pursuit of peace. And it's about more than just one day. The act of remembering, of honouring our veterans, is something that shapes us as individuals and as a nation. It instills in us a sense of duty, of responsibility to uphold the values for which so many have fought. It fosters a spirit of patriotism, a love for our country, and for the principles it represents. And let's not forget the message it sends to our veterans themselves. When we remember, we tell them, your service matters, your sacrifice is not forgotten, you are valued and appreciated. So you see, the significance of Veterans Day runs deep. It's a day of remembrance, of honour, of gratitude. But it's also a day of teaching and learning, of instilling values and fostering patriotism. It's a day that connects us to our past, grounds us in the present, and guides us towards the future. In remembering, we honour the past, appreciate the present, and inspire the future. So, what have we learned about Veterans Day? We've ventured on a journey through time, from the ashes of the Great War to the present day, tracing the origins and evolution of Veterans Day. We've discovered that this day, born out of the armistice that ended the First World War on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, was initially established to honour the veterans of that war. Over the years, it has grown in scope and significance, evolving into a day that honours all military veterans who have served in the United States Armed Forces. Today, it is a day marked with solemn ceremonies, vibrant parades, and quiet moments of remembrance, as we lay wreaths at memorials and honour the service and sacrifices of our veterans. But Veterans Day is more than an annual observance. It's a reminder of the values that these brave men and women fought for. It's about remembering not just their sacrifices, but the freedoms they protected, the peace they sought, and the unity they embodied. As we look to the future, let's carry these lessons forward. Let's honour our veterans not just with ceremonies and parades, but by living the values they fought for in our everyday lives. As we honor our veterans, let us remember not just the sacrifices they made,